Hey guys, what is up, and I welcome each and every one of you to a new League of Legends video. So ever since I made my best Yasuo builds video about a week ago, a lot of people have been requesting me to make one for Zed as well. So back when the preseason changes were only still on the PvE server, I made a quick video telling you guys what I think will be the best Zed builds, but now that the changes have been on the live servers for a while, it's definitely time to update those builds and give you guys a better rundown. So throughout this video, we will first be talking about the Keystone Masteries for Zed. We will briefly touch on the 3 different builds that I will be talking about throughout this video, and then we'll go into those 3 builds more in depth. So Keystone Masteries are the first topic, and they are a very important part of League of Legends now ever since Riot put so much more emphasis on them. And even though I feel like it should be fairly obvious which one to take on Zed, let's talk about it very quickly anyways. So starting things off for us is Fervor of a Battle, a mastery I used to really enjoy taking because I thought it was quite strong, but the recent nerfs to this mastery have made it somewhat useless, and until it gets a huge buff, I don't think it'll be a very good option on Zed. But if it ever does get a really nice buff, I think this can be definitely a very strong mastery. Following that, we have the Keystone that has Talon's twin brother on it apparently. It seems like no one even remembers that this Keystone exists, and I actually don't think it's that bad. Now of course there is one Keystone at the moment that is just flat out better in almost every single way, but Storm Raider Surge is getting some sweet buffs on the PvE, which will make it much more tempting. But regardless, Zed has enough mobility in his skits, so you don't really need this mastery. And last but definitely not least, we have Thunder Lord's Decree. Now I don't think it should be a surprise when I say that you should be taking this mastery on Zed. You should forget every single other Keystone mastery exists, and I promise you, you will be a happy assassin in the mid lane. It adds to his already high burst, it makes his combo in the lane absolutely disgusting if you land all 3 of your abilities on your target, and it truly is League of Thunderlords. So I don't think it should be a surprise when I recommend that out of these 3, Thunderlord's Decree is definitely the way to go. I will give you guys the full mastery and rune page right before we go in depth into each of the 3 builds. But speaking of the builds for Zed, what exactly do you build on him now? Well, the main question is, are you a Blade of the Rune King person or are you a Hydra person? So I'll talk about 3 different builds in just a moment, but before that, a very important disclaimer. I quickly want to mention that if you plan on getting Maw of Malmortius, not only is it a fantastic item and a great option against an AP mid laner whose damage you are respecting or you just need the extra help, but you should almost always get it right after you finish your Yomus. So keep this in mind whenever you're looking at the builds that I'll have in just a minute. And another thing you can also do is after you finish Yomus, you can simply just get the Dirk, which is the armor penetration dagger, and leave it at that in order to further snowball your lead. This is a very greedy thing to do, but it can also be very effective. So I think it is definitely finally time to go right into the builds and get a better idea on what you should be doing and building on Zed pre-season 6 or even season 6. So first we have build number 1 that is incorporating the idea of still using Blade of the Rune King on Zed. Blade of the Rune King has always been more or less a staple item on this champion, and I feel like a lot of people are just way too used to this item to go away from it. After a lot more testing and even some research, I've realized that this is actually still not too bad on Zed as long as you make it work properly. Next up we have the Hydra build, which I have to say is becoming more and more popular ever since Borg just doesn't feel as strong as it used to on Zed. This is a fantastic build because it offers more raw damage than the Blade of the Rune King build path. It has nice AoE built into it as well, a sweet auto attack reset, great AoE potential in team fights, and it really just feels like it has a lot going for it. And the last build we'll talk about is going to be sort of a split pushing dueling type build, combining Phantom Dancer, Infinity Edge, and Blade of the Rune King, giving you a lot of attack speed and just overall dueling power. I still highly recommend using one of the first 2 builds that we'll be talking about, whether it's the Blade of the Rune King path or the Hydra path, but this is still worth mentioning. Let's quickly touch on the runes and masteries you want to use on Zed because they are standard throughout all of the builds. Armor pen reds and flat AD quins, flat armor yellows, and flat or MR per level blues. If you're facing an AP mid laner, you can switch out the yellows for HP per level instead. So let's talk about the first major build, building Zed with Blade of the Rune King. So the starting items are the exact same in every single build. Usually you want to go longsword and 3 potions, but you can definitely get away by going boots and 4 potions instead. Now the core items for this build, Yomus without question on every single build is the first item you want to get. After that, I personally like getting boots of mobility to roam around and get kills, but you can switch out these boots for whichever ones you prefer. And finally Black Cleaver and of course Blade of the Rune King. When it comes to choosing your other items, I highly recommend choosing between either Mercurial Scimitar for the end QSS, Maul of Malmorius is another great option which you should get right after your Youmuu's if you ever want to get it, Bloodthirster for the nice shield, more lifesteal and just raw damage, or Guardian's Angel if you feel like you have enough damage but you want to get some defensive items. I'm personally not a huge fan of the Last Whisper items because I feel like they're actually quite bad, but if you want to get them, go for it. So something new I'll be doing in my guide type of videos and explaining the best builds for each champions is giving you an example type build path. So for this build, there's two different ways you can build it. Now they each start more or less the same way by getting Youmuu's and then your boots of choice. But then you can either rush the Black Cleaver, which at first I thought was kind of odd until I've tried it out and I actually liked it quite a bit because you get 30% CDR very quickly, you're very tanky and your damage is still definitely there. And then you get Blade of the Ruined King right after the Black Cleaver because the attack speed from Blade of the Ruined King is more or less useless earlier in the game. Or build path number 2, you can instead after Youmuu's and your boots get the Cutlass just for the active effect and then delay the Blade of the Ruined King finish until you get the Black Cleaver. Both of these build paths are quite viable, so definitely choose which one you like the most. So now I'm sure most of you are questioning, when do I go this build over maybe the Hydra build? What are the pros and cons? Well, I've noticed that the Blade of the Ruined King build is actually not only still quite strong, but it's very good whenever you want to pick it against a squishy target that's very mobile. So for instance, if you're maybe facing LeBlanc, if you're facing someone like a Vayne, maybe a Tristana, or just anyone that has a lot of mobility that you should be killing and it is your job to kill, Blade of the Ruined King's active effect that gives you move speed and slows them down is very useful. If you're feeling like you want to split push a bit more than team fight, this is also a pretty nice time to get Blade of the Ruined King because attack speed is really nice in that scenario. And then you have the obvious effects like the active effect of Blade of the Ruined King making it easier to land your Qs and also increasing the damage on your death mark and just making Zed feel a bit smoother of a champion with the increased attack speed. However, the bad parts of this build is that it offers 50 less AD compared to the Hydra build in just the core items. The wave clear of course isn't necessarily as high as the Hydra, though it is still quite good. The AoE damage isn't as high as the Hydra build, and overall the power spike isn't as great as well, and you'll see why soon. But let's now move into the second build that you can now do on Zed and be just as effective as the standard Blade of the Ruined King. So like I said earlier, the starting items are still the same, however the core items there is one difference. Instead of Blade of the Ruined King, you now get Hydra. Now when you want to decide what items you want for the last two slots, well the recommendations are more or less the same, however Death's Dance is quite good here. The reason for that is because whenever you use the active effect of Hydra, Death's Dance works off of it as well and you have a very high amount of lifesteal. So unless you need a very situational item like Mercurial Scimitar to maybe Q assess something like a Rammus Taunt, or getting Maul of Malmorius to help you in the laning phase, I would definitely recommend trying out the Death's Dance. You'll be very pleased with the lifesteal that you'll have. So taking a quick look at the example build paths that I have, the first one is one that I really want to talk about. I like to call this one the double pickaxe build path. Now again, it starts the same, Youmuu's into your boots of choice, but then I like to get the double pickaxe. One of these pickaxes is going to be building into the Tiamat, eventually into a Hydra, and the other one can go into two items, whether that's going into the Mercurial Scimitar for the QSS or going into Death's Dance because like I said, it is quite strong here. Now the reason I really like this build path is because after you get your boots and you get the double pickaxe, that's a lot of damage that you just put into your kit without actually finishing an item, so you have quite a bit of damage to deal at this point. Then you have example build path number 2. Now this one I recommend only doing if you are planning to go for the Maw of Malmorius within the lane. This is because if you end up going for the Maw, well you're just not gonna have enough item slots to get the double pickaxe while still having room for maybe a ward or maybe potions as well, and I just feel like it'll delay the Black Cleaver a little too much. But that's how the build path can look whenever you're going for the Hydra route. So what are the good things about this build? Why would I ever want to go this over the Blade of the Ruined King? Well, like I said, this build in the core items alone has 50 more AD offered. This works very well with Zed's W passive, giving you more AD based on how much AD you already have. The auto attack reset from Hydra is fantastic. Again, the lifesteal from this item, maybe with Death's Dance and even a Bloodthirster, is also extremely high. I promise you, going from no HP to using it on a full minion wave, you'll go to almost full HP. The build path, like you saw earlier with the double pickaxe, is also very interesting because it has a huge power spike and you can do a lot of damage very quickly, a lot of AoE potential within team fights, and it just overall is a really solid build path that I highly recommend trying out if you haven't. Now, the bad things about this build is that you don't have a lot of attack speed, so you feel a little sluggish because of that. And if a high priority kill target like the ADC or the mid laner is very mobile, well, using this build to kill them is not going to be the easiest thing in the world, since this build focuses more on raw damage and not as much on the utility. But let's quickly talk about the final build. Now, I'm not going to be spending too much time on this one because I simply don't think it is just as good as the other two, but it's still pretty cool. So the core items for this one, I actually have 6 items listed because they're all pretty core in order to make this build work with how I intended to. You have a lot of mobility, a lot of attack speed, you have the crit potential from the IE and the PD combination, and you have a lot of dueling power as well thanks to the PD's passive reducing the damage on your target. So the example build path down below is how you can definitely build this, and there really isn't a whole lot of other things to mention other than maybe removing the PD for one of the items to choose from, like the Death's Dance, QSS, or maybe Bloodthirster or Maw of Malmortius. So again, you want to go this build if you want to either try something new or you want to be a dueling a monster and split push non-stop. But the only issue with this build is that it not only is very expensive, but there's not a whole lot of variety and you have to more or less go those 6 items. So with all that being said, again, not the best Zed build at the moment. You definitely want to go one of the first 2 that we talked about, but this is still something to keep it fresh and to try something new. So that is about it for this video, guys. If you did enjoy it or learn something new, definitely hit that like button to show your support. It's a fantastic way of letting me know if you did enjoy a video or not. Also, definitely check out my best Season 6 Yasuo builds and a really cool full gameplay of Azir showing off some new mechanics. But I truly thank each and every one of you for watching this video and supporting me and my channel, and I hope to see you for the next one as well. Peace.